Naruto passed the academy exam with flying colors. He and Sasuke scored the top of their class, with Shino and Kiba close behind. As expected, due to his laziness, Shikamaru got one of the lowest scores, only just reaching the requirements needed. Ino and Choji had done well too, receiving high marks in their ninjutsu test. Hinata did well on her practical test, and even better on her written exam, having the third highest in the class outside Naruto. And of course, Sakura. Sakura Haruno did perfectly on the written test, but only scraped by on the practical due to her near-perfect chakra control. But she had to be careful with her chakra since she had so little. Sasuke had messed up a few of the written questions, but scored flawlessly on the practical, producing the most shadow clones out of the entire class. Naruto did well in everything besides the clone test. He was able to pass it, however, since Hiruzen had helped him with learning the shadow clone jutsu. It came much easier since he didn't need as precise chakra control. He decided to hold off on learning the multi-shadow clone jutsu, despite having the necessary chakra, because he wanted to learn how to create elemental clones first. Shikamaru had, begrudgingly, started helping him use his different nature transformations a year ago. He couldn't perform any proper ninjutsu yet, but he was able to use his fire, lightning, and wind style in quick bursts and in rapid succession. Water and earth style required greater concentration right now. It seemed that Naruto was somehow able to use each element without hand signs, or performing proper techniques, albeit with less powerful outcomes. However, he did have one technique he was working on. He also learned how to channel elemental chakra through kunai, as well as how to use basic storage seals, though he wasn't good with them yet. Currently, he and his peers were receiving their shinobi headbands. He chose one in black, as did Sasuke, since they received the highest scores. The rest got blue ones. After the graduation ceremony, his classmates were greeted by their parents, while Naruto stood in the back. They all seemed happy. He was too, of course, but saddened at the same time. He clutched his stomach where the 8 trigram seal was placed, remembering back to the day he first saw it several months ago. "I wonder, Fox, do you feel lonely?" he muttered. "What was that, Naruto?" Iruka asked, startling him. "Oh, nothing, just talking to myself," Naruto answered with a smile. "What's up, Iruka-sensei?" Iruka smiled back. "I wanted to invite you to my home tonight, to celebrate your graduation." "Really?" Naruto asked, sparkles in his eyes. No one had ever asked him over to dinner before, mostly because he wasn't allowed to. "It's the least I can do to congratulate you," Iruka responded, kneeling in front of the blonde. "I spoke to Lord Hokage as well. If he wasn't busy, he said he'd drop by." "The old man too?" Naruto breathed out, shaking his head vigorously. "Yes, I'll be there. Thanks, Iruka-sensei," he answered before running off with a foxy grin. Iruka smiled proudly at the blonde as he dashed away. He was amazed at how much, yet how little Naruto had changed over the last 3 years. His pranks had stopped, and he had started hanging out with his classmates after lessons more often. His shinobi skills had also improved, putting him above Kiba, who used to be blatantly superior and equal to Sasuke. But his vibrant personality persisted, even if he tended to act more closed off at times. Those days when Naruto was quiet were the days Iruka was easy on him, not wanting to push the blonde. For his part, Naruto was bursting with excitement at the moment, not only for spending time with Iruka and Hiruzen, but because he was a shinobi now. That meant the civilians couldn't touch him, and even the adult shinobi to an extent. He was a part of their military ranks now. He decided to forego his regular training for the day, instead getting himself ready for tonight. He made sure to change his clothes into something that didn't smell like the forest and animals, and made sure to wash his hair as best he could. By the time the evening was upon him, he was running towards Iruka's apartment. But when he knocked, no one came to greet him. Puzzled, he jumped through the open window, seeing that no one was home. Disappointment settled quickly, before he remembered that Hiruzen might be joining them. So he decided to head to his office. When he made it to the window, he was greeted by the old man, standing off against someone he recognized, Mizuki, his other sensei at the academy. The man had it out for him, and he wasn't afraid to show it. He noticed a large scroll on Mizuki's back, recognizing it as the Scroll of Sealing back when Hiruzen showed it to him. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but from Mizuki's expression and the Hokage's subtle yet cold fury, Naruto imagined this was not going to end well. "Naruto, what are you doing?" a hushed voice asked from behind him. Naruto whipped around to see Iruka, accompanied by a team of Chunin. "Iruka-sensei, I came looking for you, what's going on?" the Uzumaki asked in a whisper. "Mizuki's attempting to steal the scroll, but Lord Hokage caught him red-handed. We're here to take him into custody," he answered, gesturing to the shinobi behind him. "How can we be sure this boy isn't with Mizuki?" one of the younger ninja added. "I know Naruto, he wouldn't do something like this." The teacher saw the suspicion on his face. He sighed. "Have a Yamanaka scan him if you need, but let's do it after we get Mizuki." In that moment, a Fuma shuriken shattered the window, grazing Naruto's shoulder as it flew past. The boy grunted in pain, clutching the wound. A second later, Mizuki jumped through the window, the Scroll of Sealings nowhere in sight. The man saw the face of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, deciding to change his plans. He made a beeline for the boy, Iruka stepping in front, blocking his kunai slash with one of his own. Naruto saw the second kunai Mizuki held swipe upward, cutting Iruka's tuning vest, piercing his flesh. "Iruka-sensei!" Naruto shouted in dismay as Iruka fell backwards. The rest of the shinobi sprung into action, but they were too late, as Mizuki had already grabbed Naruto by the collar. He pressed a kunai against his neck. "Everyone stay back, or the boy dies, and you all know what that means." The shinobi froze. They did know, or at least they thought so. Naruto tried to struggle, but Mizuki's grip was firm, clamping his hand over his mouth. "I suppose you don't know what I'm talking about, do you, brat?" Mizuki asked, his voice growing more and more sadistic. "What if I were to tell you why the people of this village hate you? What would you do with that information?" "He already knows," a cold voice stated from behind the Trader of the Leaf. Hiruzen rested his hand on Mizuki's shoulder, his wooden pipe bursting with fire. "But how?" Mizuki shouted. "I slit your throat!" Hiruzen breathed out a tendril of white fire from his pipe. "Did you think I'd grown weak in my old age? There's a reason I'm the Hokage. What you killed was a shadow clone. Now, surrender, or I'll have to use lethal force." Mizuki growled with rage, substituting with a wooden log, Naruto in tow. From the top of the Hokage tower, he threw his last Fuma shuriken, aimed at Iruka. Hiruzen was in front of it in an instant, catching the shuriken mid-flight. "Thank you, Lord Hokage," Iruka grunted as he looked up at Naruto with worry. Mizuki's plan had failed again, so he began walking backwards, pulling the blonde along with him. But Naruto had had enough. He bit down on Mizuki's hand, hard, making him scream in pain. This gave Naruto enough room to pull himself free of his grip. "It's now or never," Naruto declared, channeling wind chakra to the soles of his feet. "Wind style! Soul speed!" The burst of wind sent Naruto's foot into Mizuki's face, making him cough blood. This jutsu was still a work in progress, so he had to be careful. By concentrating wind at his feet, he could empower his kicks, or use it to increase his overall speed. It was an advanced form of the regular form of travel between the academy and his forest haven. However, it needed precise control. Naruto landed and channeled more chakra. However, it backfired. He molded the chakra too fast, meaning the burst was unstable. He was sent barreling into Mizuki's chest, making him stumble backward. The man seized, throwing a kunai at Naruto. The blonde narrowly avoided it, throwing a kunai of his own, laced with lightning chakra. The blade hit Mizuki's leg, making him convulse in pain as the energy shot through him. Earth style! Earth bindings! Hiruzen planted his hands on the ground, stone chains wrapping around Mizuki. He struggled to break free, but to no avail. I must commend you for one thing, Mizuki. No one has ever stolen the scroll of sealing and gotten out of my office. Granted, I let you, because we all know you had no chance. Mizuki glared daggers, both at him and Naruto. It only seems fitting that he used one of the scroll's many abilities on you to showcase what you failed to take, the Hokage added, placing his hand on Mizuki. You'll pay for this one day, Hokage, Mizuki declared. Both you and that demon brat. Naruto flinched at his words, Iruka looking up at his old friend with sad eyes. He rested his hand on Naruto's shoulder, still clutching his wound. Naruto, watch carefully. This is what happens to people who abandon their village. Whatever you do, promise me you'll never follow the path Mizuki did. Naruto felt a tear in his eye. Yes, Iruka-sensei, I promise. Iruka grinned through the pain, his eyes focusing back on Mizuki. Hiruzen performed a single hand sign, calling out the jutsu's name. Flying Raijin Jutsu! With those words, Mizuki disappeared in a bright light. Everyone stared in awe, the only one to speak being Naruto. That was the fourth Hokage's signature jutsu, wasn't it? Hiruzen took a long breath from his pipe, the fire around it subsiding. Yes, it was. However, I cannot use it to the same degree. All I can do is send others through the Horaitian marker. I cannot do so myself. But where did you send him, Lord Hokage? One of the shinobi asked. To the interrogation center. He might have been working for someone. If that's the case, I want to know about it. And what should we do about him? The same ninja asked, pointing directly at Naruto. He's the reason Mizuki didn't run off, prolonging this eventful evening. I, for one, am grateful. Hiruzen groaned. I have too much paperwork to complete by tomorrow, and this broke my entire schedule. Take him and Iruka to be treated. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I won't be able to join the two of you tonight. But perhaps another time. Naruto smiled back. It's fine. I'm just glad no one got seriously hurt. Hiruzen chuckled, signaling for his Anbu to take Naruto and Iruka to the hospital. The remaining shinobi were angry at their Hokage. Why did you let the boy go? He's bad news, one of them asked. Agreed. We still don't know if he was in cahoots with Mizuki, and only switched sides when he saw Mizuki was going to be captured, another added. You are all fools, the third said abruptly, making them all shut up. None of you know the real Naruto Uzumaki. Perhaps if you stopped viewing him as the Nine Tails, and as a human, you might understand that. Plus, he's a full-fledged shinobi now, a proud member of the Leaf. Another ninja snorted. That's only if he passes Kakashi Hatake's test. From what I've heard, he's never passed a single Genin squad. The Hokage chuckled again. You'd be surprised how resourceful Naruto is, as well as his classmates. There's no doubt in my mind, they'll pass. Next day. That night was one of the best Naruto had, excluding the encounter with Mizuki. Iruka was a good cook, and the fact Naruto's diet mainly consisted of woodland supplies and the occasional bowl of ramen from Ichiraku made the meal even better. But right now, he was bored out of his mind. The mild shock of his new outfit had worn off, which meant he had nothing to do while he and his fellow Genin waited for their Jonin instructors to appear. For the last few years, he'd worn an orange jumpsuit. Most people thought it was ugly, and he was inclined to agree. But it was the only warm piece of clothing he could find that wasn't destroyed. He still liked the orange, so when he went shopping for his shinobi outfit with Iruka, he made sure to keep it in the new style. Of course, he had his headband in black, but he'd also swapped his regular white shirt for a black one with long sleeves. Over that, he had an orange t-shirt with a hood and the Uzumaki squirrel outlined with white on his back. For his pants, he had blue shorts and matching sandals. And lastly, a kunai holster on his right leg, with his pouch filled with other tools, including one storage scroll Hiruzen gifted to him last birthday on his waist. "I hope I get to team with you, Naruto," Shikamaru groaned, head in his hands. "Why's that?" the blonde asked, sitting up straight. "Because you're laid back, most of the time anyway. Plus, most of the other genin are obnoxious in one way or another." Naruto chuckled. "I wouldn't mind being on your team, though I wouldn't mind being with Hinata either. If it were the three of us, that would be amazing." Shikamaru huffed. "Yeah, but that's probably not going to happen, since I'm likely to end up with Choji and Ino to keep up the tradition. And Hinata's gonna be with Kiba and Shino, since they all have tracking abilities." Naruto's face turned pale. "If that does happen, I'll be stuck with those two. At least he's mellowed out some, and you're the closest to him out of anyone, considering how much you spar and compete with each other," Shikamaru pointed out. "I guess. It's the other one I'm most worried about. But don't they normally make the genin teams even? Putting the two with the highest grades together seems against that." Shikamaru shrugged. "Other factors are likely at play, like him being an Uchiha, and you being... well, you know what I mean." Naruto frowned but nodded. Shikamaru was the only one who knew he had the Nine Tails inside him. They both suspected Shino knew, because he seemed to have his insects constantly gathering information. Lastly, Hinata was a possibility, due to her Byakugan, which could easily see the fox's chakra. But she never brought it up, so they weren't certain yet. "Maybe Sasuke was informed about me as well." "Maybe," Shikamaru responded, falling back asleep. It was short-lived, as two Jonin entered the room seconds later. Asuma Sarutobi and Kurenai Yuhi. And as Shikamaru predicted, it was Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto left. They waited hours, and it was already well into the day. Sakura was growing angrier by the second, but was doing a surprisingly good job at holding it in. Sasuke was unimpressed, but remained neutral. Naruto was busying himself by doing laps around the classroom, while handstanding. And on occasion, he threw a shuriken at the still-closed door, much to Sakura's annoyance, which she made no efforts to conceal. "Would you quit that, Naruto?" Sakura shouted. Naruto didn't answer, looking over to Sasuke. "Care to join me when our sensei gets here?" Sasuke took one look at the kunai in Naruto's hand before nodding in reply. Naruto smiled and got into position. A few minutes later, he heard the sound of light footsteps. Living in the forest forced his hearing to improve, but even he was barely able to register the noise. He signaled to Sasuke, who silently reached for a shuriken. The door creaked open, and before they could even tell who it was, their projectiles were thrown. Unfortunately, the masked man caught them with ease between his fingers. His silver hair spiked up unnaturally, and his left eye was covered with his headband. His one visible eye was unamused. "Alright, who threw these?" he asked blankly. Naruto and Sasuke instinctively pointed to each other, while Sakura seemed scared out of her sandals. "You two," the man said in a serious tone, which abruptly changed into a cheerful one. "I like you two, but just a little. Now, meet me on the roof, and we'll get started." With that, the Jonin vanished in smoke. While Sakura was trying to push away the smoke, both Naruto and Sasuke made a dash for the window. The blonde was out first, using the smoke to disguise his use of wind chakra to shoot himself upward. He landed a split second after Sasuke, their teacher already leaning against the railing. "I was hoping you would use the body flicker, but that will suffice," he said, looking around. "Now, Where's the cherry tree? It took all Naruto's willpower not to laugh at the new nickname for Sakura. It annoyed him he never thought to use it before. A few seconds later, Sakura came running up the stairs. She blinked, making sure she actually saw Naruto already there. She thought he would be last. Good, now let's begin introductions. Since you're the last person here, Cherry Tree, you can go first. Sakura gulped. Can you go first to give us a demonstration? I suppose, the man replied, closing the book in his hand. My name is Kakashi Hatake. I'm a Jonin. Let's see. Likes? I've got a few. Dislikes? Maybe. And my dreams for the future? The Genin leaned forward in anticipation. I'm not telling, Kakashi finished with an eye smile. All you told us was your name, the Genin thought in unison. Sakura's introduction was boring, so everyone, especially Sasuke, drowned it out. You're next, blonde, Kakashi ordered. Naruto nodded. My name's Naruto Uzumaki. I guess I like training? Oh, and ramen. And being out in nature. I really like that. Being out in nature, I mean. Dislikes? He glanced at Sakura, then down at his stomach. I'd rather not get into that. Dreams for the future? I wouldn't mind becoming Hokage, but at the same time I'm not sure if that's what I really want. Interesting, Kakashi muttered. That just leaves you, Mr. Gloom and Doom. Naruto turned to Sasuke. Believe it or not, he was in one of his less gloomy states right now. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I like training, but it's really more of a necessity. I dislike a lot of things, especially when people fawn over me. He made sure to catch Sakura's eyes. And my dream, no, my goal, is to avenge my clan and eliminate a certain someone. Kakashi blinked as Naruto stared at Sasuke with confusion. He could make a good guess on who this person he wanted to kill was, based off all the rumors regarding the Uchiha clan massacre. Sakura was clueless, however. Okay then, first impressions, Kakashi drawled out. I've got a fangirl, a brooding Uchiha, and a nature kid with undefined goals. I'm not gonna lie, you're all pretty dull. The Genin looked at him with annoyance. However, I will give you a chance. Tomorrow we'll have a training exercise. If you pass, I'll let you become my students. And if we fail, Sakura asked, you'll go back to the academy. What? Naruto covered his ears. If Sakura spent any time training, she could have transformed that yell of hers into an original, quite powerful jutsu. I recommend you don't eat breakfast before we begin. Otherwise, it might come back up, Kakashi warned. We meet at 8 in the morning. With that, Kakashi disappeared in a spiral of leaves, leaving 3 very confused, angry Genin. Sakura's face morphed into one of worry, but then immediately turned into one of joy. Well, it's not like we have to worry about failing. We have Sasuke on our team, which means you better stay out of his way, Naruto, Sakura said in her usual tone. Naruto rolled his eyes. If anything, it should be you who should stay out of his way. You got one of the lowest scores on the practical test, while the 2 of us got the highest. I hate to say it, but Naruto's right, Sasuke chimed in, much to his teammates' surprise. To put it bluntly, he's better than you. Naruto blinked in surprise, while Sakura looked at Sasuke as if he was an entirely different person. The blonde took in a sharp breath, rising to his feet. Regardless of how good we each are, we'll have to work together if we want to beat Kakashi-sensei. He's a Jonin for a reason. Again, I reluctantly have to agree, Sasuke sighed, standing up as well. And I would recommend you all eat breakfast as well. Why? Naruto asked. Personally, he didn't see a problem with it. He was late today, which means he might be tomorrow. Besides, you can't work and train properly without eating. He just told us that to scare and weaken us. Naruto thought Sasuke's words over, They didn't make sense in that context. He looked over to Sakura, who was just watching the two boys dumbly. I guess we should wait to talk strategy until after we know what the test is, Naruto muttered. But since we have some free time, do you guys want to join me for some ramen? Why would I eat out with you? Sakura asked, as if simply thinking about the idea was stupid. And on top of that, ramen will ruin my figure. Naruto raised an eyebrow. I don't think either of us care how you look so long as you can pull your own weight. Sasuke nodded, the two boys turning to leave, leaving a mentally destroyed Sakura behind them. She ended up following them to Ichiraku, but only because her house was in the same direction. She heard the cheerful Naruto ordering his and Sasuke's ramen behind her. Just don't start thinking we're friends, idiot, Sasuke stated. Naruto snorted. I wouldn't dream of it. Sakura's stomach growled at her. No, she told herself. I need to eat something healthy. Ramen is too much salt. Next day, Training Ground 7. Naruto sat atop one of the training posts, twirling a kunai in his hand. Sasuke stood beneath him, silently eating an apple. A few feet away, Sakura was pacing back and forth, waiting for their sensei to show. That was one new thing about Sakura Naruto had noticed. She got nervous easily, and tended to pace around. Kakashi told them to meet up at 8, but it was already nearing 10:30. At that moment, Kakashi appeared beside Naruto, much to his surprise. The Uzumaki sprang back, as did Sasuke. Easy, boys. The test hasn't started yet. Now, I see the two of you ate this morning. Why did you not follow my instructions? Because they were stupid, Sasuke replied simply. Kakashi blinked, noticing that Sakura had listened to him, which was a poor decision. He shrugged and reached into his pocket. He revealed 2 silver bells attached to a red string. This test is going to put you 3 against me. The objective is to steal these bells from me. If you do, you pass. If you don't, you get tied to that post and don't eat lunch. Sakura looked at their sensei confused. But there's only 2 bells. Good observation, Kakashi replied with a sarcastic tone. There are only 2 bells because only 2 of you are passing. The other will go back to the academy. You have until noon. Better run and hide. Naruto and Sasuke disappeared instantly, Sakura following a split second later. Kakashi admitted to himself that they hid their presence well. Naruto was doing the best job, since he always smelled like the forest, which meant there was no point trying to track him by scent. Said blonde was making his way towards Sasuke via treetops. Once he found the Uchiha, he made hand signs instead of speaking, since it would alert Kakashi of their location. We should join up with Sakura. I don't like it either, but I think I understand this test, Naruto gestured. Sasuke shrugged, implying he didn't understand. He's trying to split us up, make us weaker. Plus, when have you seen a team with only 2 genin? Sasuke paused to think before nodding. He didn't like it either, but they needed Sakura's help, even if to only act as a decoy. He gave a silent sigh before following Naruto. The two found Sakura a few minutes later. She was startled to see them appear, and was also verbally against their teaming up, especially with Naruto. But after Sasuke reluctantly, yet firmly told her to join them, she agreed. Half an hour later, Kakashi could still be found in the clearing. He hadn't moved an inch, except for his hand that quickly flipped the pages of his book. He had to look up and dodge a flying shuriken. As he did, he heard rustling behind him. He turned and jumped away, avoiding Sasuke's axe kick. The Jonin moved on to the next page, spinning on his heel to kick Sasuke's side, but as he did, his foot passed right through him. An illusion clone, Kakashi mused as the fake threw a kunai, which was likely an illusion as well. He didn't bother to dodge, which is why he felt a pair of hands grab him as the kunai transformed. Sakura now held on to Kakashi with all her strength, the Jonin still getting over his shock. Now, Sakura! Sasuke's illusion clone shouted. Right! Sakura called back, planting her feet on the ground. Reverse body flicker! Kakashi's eye widened slightly. He'd never heard of this reverse body flicker, but it sounded interesting. In that instant, both Naruto and Sasuke appeared in a swirl of leaves. Sasuke couldn't help but smirk. The technique Sakura just used was one of his own design. It used double the chakra of a normal body flicker, but it was easy to use so long as you knew the regular version. You could also draw parallels with the substitution jutsu. Sakura released a portion of her chakra, and used that chakra to call Naruto and Sasuke to her position via a body flicker. The only downside to this jutsu was that the ones you were summoning had to be either willing participants, or the summoner had to use a physical item to swap them with. But since Sakura was holding on to Kakashi, it had to be the former. As Kakashi grabbed Sasuke's fist and blocked Naruto's kick, his mind began to race. An interesting technique to be sure. Both boys were nowhere near our current location, which is why I let my guard down. But what does summoning them here accomplish? He found his answer when Sasuke performed a single-hand ram sign. His face morphed into a sadistic grin. Exploding clone jutsu! Kakashi's eye widened. He'd been told Sasuke had the potential to go crazy, for lack of a better term, but he didn't expect him to blow up both his sensei and his peers. He didn't have time to think if it was a trap, as the Uchiha was about to burst. He grabbed Sakura and Naruto before vanishing in smoke. He appeared on the other end of the field, Sasuke's explosion occurring a split second later. Kakashi looked down when Sakura let go of him, and Naruto jumped away. Fire style! Fireball jutsu! Kakashi looked behind him to see a sphere of orange flames barrel towards him. He was surprised to see an elemental ninjutsu, but he was an Uchiha, so it wasn't that unbelievable. He was about to dodge, but Sakura was still in the fire's path. He had no choice but to grab her before jumping away. His hand phased right through her, making him sigh in annoyance. He'd fallen for an illusion clone again. Sakura's chakra control was refined, making it impossible for him to tell if it was an illusion. The fireball was inches away, so he decided that his students were worthy of seeing a ninjutsu of his own. Earth style. Mud wall! The ground rose to block the flames. Kakashi stood silently as the flames died down. He sensed Naruto behind him, but at this point he was guessing it was another illusion. He wasn't going to let their plans go any further. Naruto was aiming to slice the string the bells hung from, so the man sidestepped out of the way. Naruto smirked, letting go of the kunai he held. In that instant, he sent a pulse of wind chakra at the blade, forcing it into Kakashi's right thigh. The jonin winced slightly as the blade dug into his flesh, forcing him to one knee. Great. Now Naruto has a wind affinity. Hold on. He didn't use hand signs, and I barely felt any chakra being used. It wasn't a proper technique, but it was nature transformation nonetheless. Just what are these getting capable of? Sakura and Sasuke appeared out of their hiding places, joining Naruto to charge at their sensei. You're really getting on my nerves, the jonin muttered. It's time to show you why I am one of the strongest jonin in the leaf. Kakashi disappeared from view in an instant. He only appeared for a split second to knee Sakura in the chest, knocking her to the ground. He then went for Sasuke. The Uchiha barely managed to bring his arm up to defend, but the punch still sent him flying. Lastly was Naruto. Kakashi stood over the boy, arm raised, to deliver a swift chop to the neck. Naruto knew he didn't have time to properly mold his chakra, so he let it run wildly through his feet. Wind style, soul speed! The blast sent him flying into the air, far out of Kakashi's reach. Naruto couldn't help but grin. This was the highest jump he'd ever done, even if it was out of control. A look of genuine shock flashed through the man's single eye before he suppressed it. This has to be an original jutsu, Kakashi thought. Otherwise, I'd have copied it at some point. But it also seems he doesn't have full mastery of it. Even so, to be able to create and use it at all is astounding. But Lord Hokage did say he was resourceful. Kakashi's eye narrowed as Naruto began to fall back to ground level. He flipped in midair to aim a kick at Kakashi. The jonin raised his arm to defend and waited patiently. He glanced to either side. Sakura was groaning in the dirt, and Sasuke was shakily rising to his knees. He looked back up, Naruto only a few inches away. He was prepared to grab and toss him to the side, when Naruto disappeared in a burst of smoke. The smoke dissipated to reveal Sakura, whose face was still scrunched up in pain. Either she's put her differences with Naruto aside, or she's doing this for Sasuke. The latter is more likely. She probably still thinks that only two of them will pass, but I think the boys figured it out. Kakashi saw Naruto appear where Sakura once was, proving it was a substitution. The blonde was already on the move, using his soul speed jutsu once again. Kakashi felt Sakura's feet hit his arm, but he was too busy, focused on the rapidly approaching Naruto, and he was too focused on him to notice the equally fast Sasuke. Kakashi had to admit these three were different than any other fresh genin he'd been forced to spar against. It actually reminded him of his own genin test, if only slightly. But he let that thought exist for too long, as Naruto and Sasuke were already on top of him, their fingers pushed against the bells, causing them to emit a light jingle sound. The sound snapped Kakashi out of his mind. His eye hardened. Faster than any of the genin could track, Naruto landed a strike on each of them, knocking them unconscious. "Well now," Kakashi muttered, "it would seem I've got no choice." Half an hour later, the genin began to stir. Naruto was the first to realize where they were. Each of them was leaning against the trading posts. However, they weren't tied up. Naruto didn't know if that was good or bad, since none of them had gotten the bells. "So, did we pass or not?" Sasuke groaned, clutching his head. Naruto stood to give Sakura a hand up, but when she saw his outstretched arm, she brushed it away. Naruto frowned, and could sense Kakashi was disappointed as well, but he'd already made his decision. None of you managed to steal the bells. However, Naruto and Sasuke were able to touch them, and you, Sakura, did your best to support them. When all is said and done, you should all be sent to the academy. But I'm going to give you a choice. The three of you get to choose one of you to return to the academy. The remaining two will become my students. Naruto knew this was a trick, but he wanted to see how his fellow genin would react. He was reluctant to call them comrades, or even friends, and this would solidify his standing with them. He noticed Sakura was about to speak, but the Uchiha beat her to it. "Don't take us for fools, Kakashi-sensei. We figured out the trick to this test." Kakashi blinked. "Really? And what would that be?" Sakura glanced at the Jonin, then back to Sasuke. "This was to test our teamwork, to see if we could act as a team with a chance of being sent away looming over us." "So that's why there were only 2 bells?" Sakura muttered. "Yes, it was," Kakashi admitted. "So, does that mean you're not kicking someone out?" "Yes. I refuse to let my teammates leave." He looked at Naruto, "but only for my benefit." Naruto saw a hint of happiness in his eyes, meaning his words weren't entirely true. He didn't mind the blonde being on his team. Sakura, on the other hand, both could live without her. But they still needed her if they wanted to be genin. Sakura didn't need convincing to agree with Sasuke, even if she didn't like Naruto, and the blonde didn't vote either. Kakashi was proud, indicated by the thumbs up he gave his students. "In that case, you all pass. You didn't abandon your comrades. In the real world, you will find that most shinobi put the mission above their fellow shinobi, and in my opinion, those people are scum." Naruto chuckled. "But those who abandon their friends are worse than scum, right?" Kakashi looked at the blonde in surprise. "Where did you hear that?" Naruto stuffed his hands in his pockets. "It just makes sense, I suppose." Kakashi stared at him before nodding. "Regardless, you're correct. Abandoning your comrades makes you the worst scum imaginable. Don't forget that, my students, because, from now on, we are Team 7. Sakura's eyes lit up in excitement. Sasuke merely smirked, while Naruto let a smile grace his lips. His time as an academy student was over. He was now a genin, and many trials and tribulations were yet to come. If only he knew what was going to take place in the coming years. If you like what you just heard, consider hitting the subscribe button and bell icon to get notified about new videos. If there's a part you've missed, then check out the entire playlist on screen. If you like this story, please share it with your fellow anime lovers. Any support helps a lot. That's all for now. This is Ninja Kai, disappearing in a golden flash.